The flight attendant's haughty voice cut through the hush of the opulent cabin, loud enough for every passenger to hear. "I'll remind you one last time. Move to the back of the plane immediately, or I'll have to call security." Her words dripped with contempt as she glared down at the black woman seated calmly in the plush leather chair. Around them, passengers, accustomed to relaxing amid fine wood paneling and gilded accents, shifted their attention to the unfolding confrontation. Some watched with curiosity, others looked offended, but no one dared to speak up. The black woman, Naomi Williams, simply lifted her gaze to meet the attendant's, her expression betraying no tension or anger. Dressed in an elegant navy blue suit with her natural curls neatly pulled back, she radiated quiet confidence. In her late 30s, Naomi carried herself with a refined dignity, seemingly unfazed by the insult. "I've already said I'm not moving. This is my seat," Naomi replied, her tone calm but resolute. A few nearby passengers frowned at her firm yet polite response, which only served to infuriate the attendant, Laura Reed, further. In her early 40s, tall, sharp-featured, and proud of her absolute control over first class, Laura was used to unquestioning compliance. With her blonde hair in a tight bun and a perfectly pressed uniform, she believed no one should defy her. Clenching her teeth, Laura struggled to contain her anger. Her cold eyes flicked over Naomi before glancing dismissively at the manifest. To Laura, Naomi simply didn't belong among the wealthy businessmen and VIPs sipping champagne. "Excuse me, but you must be in the wrong seat," Laura said, her professionalism undermined by blatant condescension. "This cabin is reserved for our most important guests." Naomi remained unshaken, her voice steady and quietly authoritative. "I suggest you double-check the passenger list before making hasty assumptions." Passengers whispered among themselves, stealing glances at Naomi as they tried to discern her true standing. Yet no one intervened as tensions rose. Feeling her authority publicly challenged, Laura's pride flared. She forced a tight, fake smile to mask her irritation and snapped, "I don't need to check anything. I know exactly who belongs here. If you don't move, I'll have security escort you off this plane right now." An uneasy silence fell. Naomi didn't flinch or reply. Instead, she reached for her phone, typed a brief message with deliberate calm, and set it aside, her eyes drifting serenely to the window. Unbeknownst to Laura, this small composed gesture would ignite a chain of events she could never have predicted. Events that would change her life forever. Outside, a flawless blue sky stretched into infinity. Inside the lavish cabin, an unspoken battle between arrogance and dignity, prejudice and truth, was just beginning. The sky outside remained a clear, tranquil blue, but inside the first-class cabin the air felt heavier than ever. Naomi sat in silence, her gaze calmly fixed on the window, as if completely unfazed by the furious expression on Laura's face just a few steps away. A notification flashed on the phone Naomi had just set beside her. Yet she made no move to read it, an act that caused Laura's eyes to flicker in surprise before she instantly recovered her usual, forced confidence. The cabin itself was the epitome of absolute luxury. Plush, cream-colored leather seats were spaced generously apart, each offering its own private nook for relaxation. The walls were clad in exquisite oak paneling, accented with subtle gold trim that gleamed with aristocratic flair. A handful of affluent passengers sipped chilled champagne, sampling elegantly presented hors d'oeuvres served on gleaming silver trays. Soft jazz filtered from in-ceiling speakers, creating an atmosphere of serenity, an atmosphere now shattered by the unexpected standoff between Naomi and Laura. Naomi Williams was not one to seek attention. Quiet and unassuming, she nonetheless exuded an undercurrent of power. As CEO and founder of the prestigious Skylux Aviation, Naomi commanded a multi-billion-dollar fortune and sterling reputation in the business world. Yet few had ever glimpsed her true face. She shunned the spotlight and almost never appeared in public. Even the most seasoned employees rarely met her in person, as she preferred to oversee operations remotely through video conferences or via her capable assistants. This flight, organized so that she could personally evaluate staff performance, had instead become a stern test for Laura, the senior flight attendant in charge. A little farther down the cabin, Laura began to steady herself, though a flicker of unease still danced in her sharp eyes. She quickly smoothed her hair and straightened her uniform, striving to restore her trademark air of perfection and poise. She prided herself on maintaining flawless order aboard every flight she oversaw, confident in her ability to manage even the wealthiest, most powerful passengers. Yet Naomi was proving to be an irritating exception. Naomi's calm resolve reflected back Laura's own stubborn prejudice in stark relief. Determined to reassert control, Laura walked the cabin, offering each passenger a polite smile, her tone gentle and professional. A complete contrast to the way she had treated Naomi moments before. She approached the elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, longtime Skylux patrons known for their generous tips. "Is there anything else I can get for you? Another glass of champagne? Or perhaps a fresh cup of coffee for Mr. Raymond?" Laura asked, her voice virtually warm with devotion. Mrs. Raymond returned a gracious smile and shook her head. "No, thank you so much, Laura. We have everything we need." "My pleasure," Laura replied, her smile flawless and genuine-looking. But as she turned her back on the Raymonds, her expression snapped back to its original frostiness, as if that gracious smile had been nothing more than a well-worn mask. She passed a young, fashionably dressed woman who likewise received Laura's full courtesy. The stark contrast between that interaction and Laura's earlier disdain for Naomi was not lost on anyone. Several passengers had noticed. A middle-aged businessman seated near Naomi furrowed his brow and leaned toward his companion. "She seems a bit over the top, doesn't she?" he murmured. His companion nodded in agreement, her voice low enough to avoid notice. "I don't understand why she's so harsh with that woman. She did nothing wrong." Across the aisle, a pearl necklace-clad woman whispered to her friend, her eyes fixed on Naomi with curiosity. "Who do you think she is to stay so composed like that?" "I've never seen her before. She seems far more than she appears." "I'm not sure," the friend replied softly, "but it's clear the flight attendant's in real trouble behaving that way in front of everyone." The cabin's once placid ambiance had vanished. Quiet murmurs grew more distinct. Furtive glances toward Naomi multiplied, and passengers began to wonder, who was this mysterious woman? And how could she remain so unfazed by Laura's outrageous behavior? Laura, of course, sensed the shift in atmosphere, but rather than reconsider her own conduct, she grew even more resentful, convinced that Naomi alone had disrupted her perfect command. Naomi remained unmoved, her eyes drifting back to the endless white clouds beneath. She knew that greater challenges lay ahead, and that this seemingly peaceful flight was only the beginning of a stormy confrontation. The fluffy white clouds outside the window did nothing to lift the stifling tension that filled the first-class cabin. Naomi remained perfectly still, her gaze serenely fixed on the vast sky, her expression as if lost in deep reflection, entirely unfazed by the growing whispers and curious stares directed at her. After a perfunctory sweep of the other passengers, delivered with her usual feigned gentleness, Laura returned to stand directly before Naomi. She squared her shoulders and crossed her arms tightly across her chest, a clear assertion of authority. Laura's face was etched with displeasure and cruelty, her cold eyes boring into Naomi as if hunting for the slightest sign of weakness to exploit. "Ma'am," Laura's voice cut in, sharp and accusatory, entirely unlike the soft tones she'd used with the other guests. "I believe you should move to the back of the plane immediately. This section is reserved for the elite passengers who booked it." Her words rang out loudly enough for everyone in the cabin to hear, and their icy delivery only deepened the cabin's gloom. The other passengers turned as one, waiting to see how Naomi would respond. Naomi slowly turned her head, her calm gaze meeting Laura's. A pregnant pause stretched between them. Then Naomi spoke, her voice clear and quietly powerful. "I understand what you're saying, but I'm quite certain this is my seat. Perhaps you should double-check the passenger manifest to avoid any misunderstandings." Naomi's polite, composed suggestion momentarily threw Laura off balance, but pride and stubbornness surged right back up. With a mocking smile that barely concealed her contempt, Laura retorted, "I don't think I need to check anything. I've been doing this long enough to know who belongs here, and who does not." Laura swept her gaze across the cabin, as if seeking approval from the other wealthy travelers, but what she saw instead were puzzled, and even disapproving expressions. Several guests visibly bristled at Laura's blatant bias. In the row beside Naomi, a sharply dressed businessman had clearly lost his patience. He straightened his collar, fixed Laura with a stern look, and quietly remarked to his companion, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I can't believe she's behaving like this in front of paying customers. It's a serious breach of professionalism." His words sparked murmured agreement from others, their eyes growing increasingly critical of Laura. Unmoved, Laura ignored the shift in mood and continued her confrontation with Naomi, face alight with provocation. Naomi's composure remained astonishing. She seemed determined not to be drawn into Laura's petty power play, yet her calm only further enraged Laura, who realized she couldn't faze Naomi, not even a little. "Do you even know who sits in this cabin?" Laura sneered, aiming to belittle her. "These are important people. I suspect you took advantage of a gate agent's oversight to sneak in here." That cruel, baseless accusation ignited a wave of anger among the passengers. A few shook their heads in disgust, while others whispered in indignation at the hostess's rudeness in such a luxurious setting. Naomi tilted her head slightly, her composure unbroken. She met Laura's gaze with unwavering resolve. "If you continue to refuse to verify the manifest, you'll have to answer for the consequences later." Laura blinked in surprise at the gravity of that warning, but she brushed it off almost immediately. To her, Naomi was just an anonymous woman not worth worrying about, certainly not someone capable of causing real trouble. Fueled by arrogance, Laura raised her voice to a near shout, abandoning any pretense of control. "If you don't move to economy now, I will call security up here to escort you out. Don't force me into drastic measures." Her words rang like an alarm, unleashing a tide of discontent throughout first class. The guests could no longer hide their outrage. They began exchanging comments about Laura's unprofessionalism and unacceptable prejudice. Their curiosity turned to outright indignation. Through it all, Naomi sat unmoved, unshaken. She had endured prejudice and injustice before, but this time she knew she would not fight this battle alone. She would make everyone see that no one has the right to judge another by appearances or erroneous assumptions. This confrontation, she understood, was only the beginning. Laura's harsh threat rang out like a declaration of war, suffocating the first-class cabin more than ever. Passengers now openly shook their heads and exchanged disgruntled whispers. They were witnessing a shameful display of discrimination unfold in a setting renowned for its elegance and courtesy. Laura could feel the tide turning against her. Yet her long-held arrogance and pride wouldn't let her back down. Her eyes swept the cabin until they landed on a young flight attendant, Grace Adams, who stood by nervously, clearly unsettled by the confrontation. "Grace!" Laura barked, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Come over here and escort this passenger to economy class immediately." Grace started, panic flashing in her eyes. In her early 20s, Grace was known for her gentle, friendly demeanor. Her light brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail, clear blue eyes, and warm smile instantly put passengers at ease. She'd never once been rude to a guest, so when confronted with this harsh order, her worry was plain on her face. Hesitantly, Grace approached Naomi, each step weighed down by dread. Stopping a few feet away, she clasped her hands together and murmured apologetically, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but Miss Reed insists you move to economy class." Naomi gently lifted her gaze to Grace, her expression calm and compassionate, as if fully aware of the young attendant's dilemma. She paused to study the tension and fear in Grace's eyes before replying softly, "Grace, right? I suggest you ask Ms. Reed to double-check the manifest before taking any action. She's made a very big mistake." Naomi's voice was neither harsh nor condescending. It carried genuine empathy, yet enough firmness to stir something in Grace. The attendant realized Naomi wasn't seeking a scene or attention. Her composed confidence hinted at a depth Laura had underestimated. Before Grace could respond, Laura strode forward, her gaze as piercing as a dagger. "Who do you think you are, threatening me like that? Grace, don't listen to this woman. Follow my orders immediately." Grace glanced between Laura and Naomi, her eyes betraying a fierce internal struggle. She knew what she was being told to do was wrong, but Laura's authority and seniority intimidated her. Defying her could mean serious repercussions. Nearby passengers, noticing Grace's hesitation, grew bolder. The distinguished businessman who had earlier spoken up now couldn't contain himself. He cleared his throat and said loudly enough for all to hear, "Ms. Reed, perhaps you should take a moment to verify the manifest before acting. The situation is becoming very uncomfortable for all of us." Laura's anger flared. She felt her power and pride threatened in front of both passengers and colleagues. To concede now would be to admit a public mistake, something she refused to do. "This is an internal matter," Laura snapped back to the cabin, her voice icy. "Please let us handle it." Then, turning to Grace with a clear threat in her eyes, she added, "Grace, this is your only warning. Carry out my orders if you still want to keep your job." Grace paled, bowed her head, and took a trembling step back, fighting back tears. Naomi could see the anguish and helplessness on the young attendant's face, stirring both compassion and steely resolve within her. She knew she had to stand firm against Laura's abuse of power. Sitting up straighter, Naomi fixed Laura with a sharp, unwavering stare and spoke clearly and calmly, yet with unmistakable gravity. "Once more, Miss Reed, you're making a very serious mistake. If you persist in this behavior, you will face severe consequences." Laura hesitated for a moment, then scoffed, her voice dripping with mockery. "I highly doubt someone like you can do anything to worry me. The more you defy me, the worse your own situation will become." The tension felt ready to explode. Every passenger held their breath, anticipating what would come next. Naomi remained composed, but inside she was resolute. She would not allow this injustice to continue. She knew her own power, and she was certain that once her true identity was revealed, no one on this flight, especially Laura, would escape the fallout of their reckless actions. This confrontation had surpassed a mere dispute. It had become a vivid test of dignity, fairness, and authority, and Naomi knew she had to be fully prepared for the battle ahead. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin was so tense you could almost reach out and touch it. Naomi sat perfectly still, her face betraying no loss of composure, but her eyes had grown sharper, as if she were weighing her next move. The passengers around her were visibly uncomfortable, their gazes fixed not only on Laura with curiosity, but also laced with anger and disappointment. After a heavy silence, Naomi gently raised her hand, signaling politely to Laura. Her voice was soft but unmistakable. "Miss Reed, would you please bring me a glass of water? I'm feeling a bit thirsty." Laura turned, her expression icy and resentful. She looked Naomi up and down, offered no reply, and made no move toward her. Instead, she turned her back and walked off, attending to passengers several rows away, deliberately ignoring Naomi's simple request. Naomi remained calm. She knew exactly what was happening. Laura was trying to provoke her, to make her lose her cool, but Naomi wouldn't let herself be manipulated. She waited patiently for a few more minutes, then raised her hand again as Laura passed by. "Excuse me, Ms. Reed. I'm still waiting for that water. Could you help me, please?" Laura paused, shot Naomi a mocking glance, but said nothing. She continued on her way, completely disregarding Naomi's second polite appeal. That flagrant display of contempt was more than some passengers could tolerate. A middle-aged woman nearby shook her head at her companion. "This is unbelievable. How dare she treat a customer like that? It's so unprofessional." Her friend nodded in agreement, continuously throwing indignant looks toward Laura. Others began whispering sharply, their dissatisfaction growing more vocal, and that only added to Laura's tension. Sensing the tide turning against her, Laura's fury and determination to retaliate flared. In her mind, there was only one goal now: humiliate Naomi and force her out of first class as quickly as possible. She strode briskly to the galley, picked up a tray of chilled water glasses neatly arranged, and started marching back toward Naomi with a deliberately cold glare. As she passed Naomi's seat, Laura feigned a misstep, tripping over Naomi's outstretched legs in the aisle. With a dramatic shriek, she tipped the tray on purpose, dousing Naomi and the floor beneath her with cold water. "Why would you stick your foot out like that?" Laura shouted, her tone accusatory. "Look at this mess you've made." Naomi glanced down at her blazer, where the cold water had left a large, spreading stain. Yet what astounded everyone even more was her unbelievable composure. No hint of panic, no outburst. She rose slowly, gently dabbed her clothes, then calmly looked Laura in the eye. "Ms. Reed, I don't think what just happened was entirely my fault. I remained seated, and you came to me. I'd appreciate a fair and professional response." Naomi's measured, reasoned words drew immediate nods of approval from the surrounding passengers. Her poise and emotional control impressed everyone who witnessed it, but it only fueled Laura's resentment further. Laura could feel the cabin's support shifting firmly toward Naomi. That stoked her wounded pride and arrogance into a roaring fire. She could no longer restrain herself. She seemed to forget her role entirely as she lashed out publicly. "Oh, how noble of you! A woman like you, clearly trying to barge into first class, now lecturing me on fairness and professionalism. Do you even know who you're talking to? This isn't a discount carrier where you can act however you please." Her vicious sarcasm ignited outrage throughout the cabin. Several passengers began loudly objecting to her outrageous behavior. A distinguished businessman seated near Naomi spoke up instantly. "That's enough, Ms. Reed. I insist you stop this disrespect immediately. We're in a civilized environment. We won't tolerate such unprofessional conduct." Laura wheeled on him, eyes blazing. But the widespread protest had made clear she'd lost control. Rather than back down, she grew even more obstinate, her voice trembling with anger. "I know my job perfectly well. You don't need to teach me customer service." Naomi watched quietly, fully aware that her patience had become a silent strength, waiting for exactly the right moment to be shown. She knew that, soon, Laura would pay dearly for her thoughtless, insulting actions. This battle was far from over. In fact, it was just entering its most strained phase. The truth was about to emerge, and real authority would quickly return to its rightful place. The tension in first class was palpable, as if you could reach out and touch it. Naomi sat perfectly still, her composure unshaken, but her eyes had grown sharper, calculating her next move. Around her, passengers' discomfort was plain to see. Their gazes toward Laura were now laced with anger and disappointment. After a stifling silence, Naomi gently raised her hand and addressed Laura in a calm, clear voice. "Ms. Reed, could you please bring me a glass of water? I'm a bit thirsty." Laura turned, her expression icy and irritated. She shot Naomi a contemptuous look, then snubbed her request and walked away, resuming service with other passengers farther down the cabin. Naomi didn't rush. She knew exactly what Laura was doing, trying to bait her into losing her cool. Unfazed, she waited a few more minutes and signaled again as Laura passed by. "Excuse me, Miss Reed, I'm still waiting for that water. Could you please help me?" This time, Laura paused briefly, glared back defiantly, but again said nothing and continued on. Laura's blatant disrespect finally provoked some passengers to speak up. A middle-aged woman shook her head at her companion. "I can't believe she'd treat a customer like that. So unprofessional." Her friend nodded, glaring at Laura. Others began murmuring their displeasure more openly, fueling Laura's frustration. Feeling the tide turn against her, Laura's anger boiled over. Determined to put Naomi in her place, she strode into the galley, grabbed a tray of cold drinks, and marched back with purpose. As she passed Naomi's seat, Laura faked a stumble, deliberately tripping over Naomi's foot. With a dramatic gasp, she tipped the tray, drenching Naomi and the aisle in icy water. "Why are you blocking the aisle with your foot?" Laura snapped, voice sharp as a whip. "Look at this mess you've made." Naomi glanced down at her soaked blazer but remained eerily calm. She stood, gently dabbed at her wet clothes, and met Laura's gaze. "Ms. Reed, I think you'll agree this wasn't my fault. I stayed put. You moved toward me. I expect you to act with fairness and professionalism." Her measured response drew approving nods from nearby passengers, impressed by her poise. But Laura's resentment only grew. Noticing the cabin's support shifting to Naomi, Laura's pride flared. She sneered loudly. "How noble of you! A woman who clearly doesn't belong in first class? Lecturing me on professionalism? Do you even know who you're talking to? This isn't a discount flight where you can do as you please." Her scathing words ignited outrage. Passengers began vocally condemning her behavior. The distinguished businessman nearby spoke up. "That's enough, Ms. Reed. Stop disrespecting a customer. We're in a civilized environment and won't tolerate this." Laura spun toward him, fury in her eyes, but realized she'd lost control. Instead of backing down, she doubled down, voice trembling with rage. "I know my job better than any of you. You don't need to teach me how to serve guests." Then, in a moment of utter loss of control, Laura suddenly raised her hand and slapped Naomi across the face. The smack echoed like a gunshot through first class. Every passenger froze, unable to believe what they'd just witnessed. Naomi remained seated, her head tilted slightly from the force of the blow. A bright red handprint blossomed on her cheek, but her expression stayed unnervingly calm. No tears, no tremors, no hint of weakness. Slowly, she turned her head back and fixed Laura with a steely, commanding stare. Outrage erupted. James Hunter, the elegant businessman who'd been watching quietly, bolted upright. His voice rang out, seething. "Miss Reed, do you realize what you've done? That is absolutely unacceptable. You just assaulted a passenger." His fierce declaration sparked a chorus of condemnation from the other travelers. An older woman shouted, "I've flown for decades and never seen anything this appalling." Amid the rising uproar, Naomi calmly took a handkerchief from her jacket pocket and gently wiped the red mark from her cheek. Yet her eyes shone with a terrifying authority, a chilling calm that hinted at powers no one yet understood. Laura stood frozen, her slapping hand now trembling violently, her face ashen. For a split second she recognized that her impulsive act had crossed a grave line, but her pride wouldn't let her apologize. She stumbled over her words, voice quavering. I was provoked. Everyone saw it. She was deliberately causing trouble." But her feeble excuse was drowned out by the passengers' angry rebukes. James Hunter stepped forward, voice stern and unmistakable. "I witnessed everything from the start. You were the one harassing her. I'll be reporting this to your superiors as soon as we land." Laura's eyes darted wildly. She realized every passenger had rallied behind Naomi, and her situation was beyond salvage. Yet, instead of contrition, she defiantly spat. "Do what you want. I'm not afraid of any of you. What can someone like her possibly do to me?" For the first time since it began, Naomi stood from her seat. An expectant hush fell over the cabin. She met Laura's gaze, and her voice, calm, clear, and heavy with weight, cut through the silence. "Miss Reed, I have warned you countless times that you are making a grave mistake. But now I will make it perfectly clear. You have just made the biggest mistake of your life." Her icy declaration hung in the air like a verdict. No passenger doubted the power behind her words and gaze. Even Laura felt a chill as she faced Naomi's terrifying composure. Laura staggered back, unease flooding her. She still didn't know who Naomi really was, but she knew this. She had gone too far. Now she would face consequences she could never have imagined. Naomi slowly sat down, her face returning to serene composure. But beneath that calm, she knew with certainty, the real battle was only just beginning. The moment Naomi's cold, weighty warning ended, the entire first-class cabin fell into an eerie silence, as if no one dared break the tension. Laura took another step back, her eyes betraying a flicker of panic she could barely conceal, despite her efforts to look unshakable. Her breath came faster, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The hand she'd used to slap Naomi moments ago felt ice-cold and trembled, as if warning her that something terrible was about to happen. Naomi, by contrast, showed no hurry or distress. She sat down, smoothed her blazer with deliberate calm, then reached for her phone. Her movements were slow and natural, yet they carried an unseen power that drew every passenger's gaze. Curious whispers rippled through the cabin as bystanders wondered what Naomi was doing, and why her terrifying composure suggested the confrontation was far from over. Laura watched her every subtle gesture, her sharp eyes fixed on the small device in Naomi's hand. A surge of unease washed over her. She knew Naomi wasn't an ordinary passenger, but she still couldn't fathom who this woman was, or how she could remain so unfazed by such a blatant insult. Naomi unlocked her screen, her finger gliding across it with quiet confidence. She typed a brief message, tapped send, and then set the phone down beside her, gazing out the window at the endless blue sky, so at odds with the charged atmosphere inside. That seemingly simple act sparked a fresh wave of speculation. A middle-aged woman who had been watching intently leaned toward her friend and whispered loud enough for some to overhear, "Who is she that can stay so terrifyingly calm? I feel like she's messaging someone very important." Her friend nodded, her eyes still on Naomi. "I think so too. She's no ordinary traveler. Maybe she's someone high up, maybe even the owner of this airline who's been grievously insulted." Their conjecture spread like wildfire, becoming the hot topic in first class. James Hunter, the debonair businessman who had sided with Naomi from the start, now studied her carefully, brow furrowed as he searched his memory for any clue to her identity. A vague sense told him that Naomi was far beyond Laura's ability to demean. Meanwhile, Laura could feel the shift in the air. Passengers' expressions were no longer merely displeased. They now bristled with tense anticipation, as if they all understood something momentous was about to unfold. Though she forced a brave face, inside her confidence was crumbling under a growing wave of dread. She drew a deep breath and tried to regain control, stepping forward and calling out, "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. This is a minor incident, and I will resolve it shortly. I ask that you refrain from any further disturbance." But her plea only fueled their anger. An older gentleman shot back, "You call slapping a passenger minor? This is a grave offense, and you'd better prepare for the consequences." Murmurs of agreement swelled around the cabin, leaving Laura shaking with both rage and fear. Her eyes darted to Grace Adams, the young flight attendant standing anxiously in the corner. Seeing Grace's distress only worsened Laura's unease. In another part of the cabin, Naomi sat silent, her face unreadable. She didn't react to the rising tension or the hushed rumors. Her gaze remained serene, yet penetrating, hiding a formidable authority that Laura still couldn't comprehend. It was Naomi's very quietude that made everything more frightening. Passengers grew ever more certain of her true status. They whispered that she must be a powerful executive, a high-ranking official, or even the airline's owner. That speculation became the fiercest topic in first class. Laura, desperately trying to maintain her composure, found herself gripped by an overwhelming dread. She glanced again at Naomi's phone, wondering who might be receiving that message, and what it contained. The more she thought, the more unsettled she became. She realized she'd gone too far, and there was no turning back. Helpless, she stood there, forcing a facade of strength while bracing herself for the storm she knew was coming. And Laura understood at last. It was Naomi's silence, more than any outburst, that foreshadowed the true reckoning soon to befall her. Amid the heavy silence that blanketed the entire first-class cabin, Laura stood frozen, every beat of her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She fought to maintain a calm facade, but her anxious eyes kept flicking to the small phone resting on the table next to Naomi. Each passing second felt like an eternity, ratcheting up the tension and pressure building inside her. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the cockpit door. Everyone in the cabin turned their curious gazes in that direction. The door slowly swung open, and Captain Mark Donovan stepped out. An unruffled, middle-aged man with flecks of gray in his hair and an air of professionalism in his eyes. His unexpected exit from the cockpit told everyone that something extremely serious was unfolding. Mark walked forward with deliberate purpose, his face grave and concerned. Passengers instinctively made way for him as he approached Naomi's seat. Standing in the aisle, he fixed Laura with a stern, icy stare. "Laura," he began, his voice grave, "I've just received some critically important information. We've made a very serious mistake on this flight." Laura jumped and took a step back, struggle evident in her voice as she tried to sound strong before the passengers. "A mistake? What mistake, Captain? I thought I was handling everything just fine." Mark said nothing at first. He scanned the cabin, his gaze falling on Naomi's calm, authoritative face. Then, speaking deliberately so everyone could hear, he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that a grave incident has occurred on this flight. But most importantly, I want you all to know the identity of the woman who was treated so rudely and shamefully." The cabin fell into a stunned hush as every eye turned to Naomi, waiting for his next words. Mark drew a deep breath, his expression even more solemn. "The passenger whom Miss Laura Reed has so egregiously insulted, the woman sitting here before you, is Mrs. Naomi Williams, CEO and owner of Skylux Aviation, the very airline operating this aircraft." His revelation hit like a massive bomb, sending a shockwave through the cabin. Whispers and gasps erupted from every corner. Faces that had been curious or skeptical moments before now registered sheer astonishment. "Oh my goodness, is that true? She's the owner of this airline," an elderly woman murmured, her eyes wide with disbelief and regret. James Hunter, the dapper businessman who had backed Naomi from the start, immediately nodded as if every suspicion he'd harbored had just been confirmed. "I knew from the beginning there was something extraordinary about her, but to think she's the legendary Naomi Williams." The shock quickly turned to outrage, directed at Laura. Passengers who'd only quietly disapproved before now openly condemned her actions. A senior gentleman's voice rang out, "What were you thinking, Laura? That was a disgraceful, unacceptable act. We can't believe you would dare insult such an important figure." Laura stood motionless, her face flushing from red to ashen white, her eyes wide with panic. She retreated several steps, her voice trembling as she stammered, I couldn't have. No, this can't be true." She turned toward Naomi, terror and despair flooding her expression. Weakly, she tried to explain, voice quavering more than ever. "Mrs. Williams, I truly didn't know. I didn't recognize you. Please give me a chance. I never meant—" But her pleas only fueled the passenger's fury. Naomi remained silent, her gaze locked on Laura with cold, unwavering authority. That silence alone deepened Laura's dread. Captain Donovan now spoke again, his tone firm and unequivocal. "Laura, I'm afraid the consequences of this reckless behavior will be far beyond anything you can imagine, and regretfully, no one can shield you from them this time." The cabin erupted with demands that Laura be held accountable for her unprofessional, insulting conduct. Accusatory stares pinned her in place, and she seemed on the verge of collapse. Laura felt all her power and authority on this flight evaporate, replaced by overwhelming regret and despair. She looked back at Naomi and finally understood she had insulted the most powerful woman on this plane, someone more than capable of ending Laura's career with a single word. Naomi remained seated, her face serene and unshaken. Yet within that calm lay a power Laura now realized she could never hope to withstand. In that moment, Laura knew she hadn't merely made a grave mistake. She had likely sealed her own fate. Realizing the situation had completely turned, Naomi rose from her seat slowly, each movement unhurried yet radiating an authority that commanded everyone's absolute respect. In that moment, silence fell over the entire cabin. Not a soul dared speak or move. save for Laura's rapid, panicked breathing as she desperately searched for an excuse. Laura stood there like a trembling shadow, her face ashen and eyes wide with fear. She stammered toward Naomi, her voice quivering. "Miss Williams, please, let me explain. I didn't recognize you. I truly didn't mean to." Naomi lifted a hand, gentle but resolute, halting Laura in her tracks. Her gaze was sharp and imperious as she looked down upon the flight attendant who had slapped her only minutes before, now utterly bereft of confidence and pride. "Laura," Naomi began, her tone clear and unwavering, "your apologies mean nothing now. I reminded you countless times about fairness and about not judging others based on appearances or narrow-minded prejudice, yet you chose to ignore every warning." Laura opened her mouth, but no words came. Naomi's truth struck her dead silent. Naomi pressed on, her eyes locking with Laura's as each word cut through the tension like steel. "You have not only insulted me personally, Laura, but you have insulted every passenger on this flight. Your actions laid bare the discrimination, contempt, and arrogance that I will never tolerate in my company." Laura's knees buckled, and she collapsed to the aisle floor, sobbing hysterically, her voice pleading. "Please forgive me, Miss Williams. I am so sorry. I beg you for another chance. I'll do anything." But Naomi did not waver before Laura's tears. Instead, she turned calmly to Captain Mark Donovan. "Captain Donovan, effective immediately. Ms. Laura Reed is no longer an employee of Skylux Aviation. I request that she step down from her duties at once. I will work with Human Resources to ensure this matter is handled with the utmost seriousness." Captain Donovan nodded solemnly, fully supporting Naomi's decision. "I understand, Miss Williams. We stand by your decision, and on behalf of the entire crew, I apologize for this unfortunate incident." Passengers who moments before had been stunned now voiced their approval in unison. Applause erupted, an emphatic endorsement of Naomi's just action, and a show of solidarity with their powerful CEO. "Absolutely right, Ms. Williams. We support you completely," declared James Hunter, the distinguished businessman. "There's no excuse for such disrespect." Laura looked around in despair, realizing that every passenger had turned against her. No one offered compassion. Her late tears held no sway. "Miss Williams, please," she whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. Naomi remained standing, arms crossed, her gaze serene, yet commanding, as she addressed the cabin one last time. "Laura, this lesson is not just for you. It's a warning to anyone who harbors discrimination or contempt toward others based on appearance, race, or any other reason. I hope you learn from this grave mistake." With that, Naomi quietly returned to her seat. The authority she'd displayed had irrevocably changed the cabin's atmosphere. Laura watched her go, knowing her fate was sealed. Her reckless prejudice had destroyed not only her career, but also her dignity. Naomi sat down, folding her arms and gazing out the window with calm resolve. No one dared doubt the power behind her composed exterior, nor forget the lesson she'd so decisively delivered. The tense silence following Naomi's declarations still hung over the entire first-class cabin. Laura stood frozen, acutely aware of the heavy stares fixed on her. In her mind, only despair remained, as she realized there was no way to undo the damage she had caused. A few minutes later, brisk footsteps echoed from the plane's front door, drawing every passenger's attention. The door swung open, and two uniformed officers in dark blue strode into the cabin, their faces stern with the weight of their duty. Their cold eyes quickly searched the room and locked onto Laura. Laura's face went pale, and her body trembled as she recognized the gravity of the situation. She took a step back, as if trying to escape the sudden reality crashing down on her. But before long, the officers were standing directly in front of her, their authoritative voices cutting through the hush. "Ms. Laura Reed, we have received a report that you assaulted a passenger on this flight. Please cooperate and come with us to the station for questioning." Laura jolted, shaking her head wildly as she pleaded in desperation. "No, it wasn't like that. It's just a misunderstanding. Please, I didn't mean to. You have to believe me." Her feeble excuses changed nothing. The officers produced gleaming handcuffs purposeful in their duty. At the sight of them, Laura panicked completely, her gaze snapping toward Naomi as tears welled in her eyes. "Mrs. Williams, I beg you, please drop these charges. I understand my mistake. I'll do anything to make this right." Naomi remained silent for a moment, then rose slowly, her every movement commanding respect. She stepped closer to Laura, her voice soft yet firm. "Laura, everyone makes mistakes, but an apology means nothing without accepting responsibility. I gave you countless chances to understand that, yet you ignored every warning." Laura's legs buckled as she trembled, delivering one final desperate plea. "Please, I know I was wrong. Just give me one more chance. I don't want my life to end like this." Naomi cast a steady glance over the passengers, reminding everyone of the moment's significance. Then, looking back at Laura, she spoke with unmistakable clarity and compassion. "I believe in forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't absolve you of responsibility. If I let you off today, how many more will suffer your actions tomorrow? You must be held accountable, not just for your sake, but out of respect for every passenger on this flight." Her words drew immediate, heartfelt applause. It wasn't just agreement, it was a powerful affirmation of justice. The officers moved in, clasped Laura's wrists, and snapped the handcuffs shut. The cold click of metal felt like the final verdict on her career. Laura broke down sobbing, trembling as she glanced around at passengers whose faces mixed sympathy with satisfaction that justice had been served. Escorted out of the cabin, her steps grew unbearably heavy under the weight of thoughtful eyes. Everyone understood Laura had received the harshest lesson of her life. A lesson meant not only for her, but for anyone harboring misplaced prejudices. Naomi returned to her seat, serene and composed, showing neither triumph nor glee. To her, this was not personal vengeance, but a victory for fairness and human dignity. She knew this moment would resonate throughout Skylux Aviation and beyond, as a clear statement that respect and equality are non-negotiable. Whispers spread through the cabin as onlookers reflected on what had just transpired. Most expressed gratitude for Naomi's decisive, principled action. James Hunter stepped forward, offering a warm, respectful nod. "Mrs. Williams, I admire your decision. It's a powerful lesson for anyone who looks down on others." Naomi smiled gently, her voice warm yet resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Hunter. The most important thing is that we recognize our shared equality. No one deserves disrespect simply because of appearance or false assumptions." As the door closed behind Laura, it sounded like a final declaration. Naomi knew this wasn't merely Laura's end. It was the beginning of a broader journey toward a more just environment within Skylux Aviation. And she understood that journey had only just begun. The tense silence that filled the first-class cabin after Naomi's declarations still lingered, as Laura stood frozen, acutely aware of every heavy gaze fixed on her. In her mind, only despair remained. She knew there was no undoing the damage she had done. A few minutes later, the sound of firm footsteps echoed from the plane's entrance, drawing every passenger's attention. The door swung open, and 2 uniformed police officers in dark blue strode in, their faces stern with duty, their cold eyes quickly locked onto Laura. Laura's face drained of color, and her body shook as she realized the gravity of the moment. She instinctively took a step back, as if to escape the reality crashing in on her, but the officers were already standing in front of her. Their commanding voices cut through the hush. "Ms. Laura Reed, we've received a report that you assaulted a passenger on this flight. Please cooperate and come with us to the police station for questioning." Laura flinched and shook her head, her voice trembling with desperation. "No, it's not like that. It was just a small misunderstanding. Please, I didn't mean to. You have to believe me." Her weak protests did nothing to change their resolve. The officers produced shining handcuffs, ready to do their duty. At the sight of them, Laura panicked completely. She reached out toward Naomi, tears welling in her eyes, pleading in a broken voice, "Mrs. Williams, I beg you. Please withdraw the charges. I understand my mistake now. I'll do anything to make this right." Naomi remained still for a moment, then rose slowly, her every movement calm yet powerful, commanding the attention and respect of everyone aboard. She stepped forward a few paces, her voice soft but carrying unmistakable authority. "Laura, everyone makes mistakes, but an apology alone isn't enough without taking responsibility. I gave you multiple chances to understand that, yet you chose to ignore every warning." Laura's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, her voice ragged with hope for one last reprieve. "Please, I know I was wrong. Just give me one more chance. I don't want my life to end like this." Naomi cast a sweeping glance over the other passengers, reminding them of the lesson at hand. Then, fixing her gaze on Laura, she spoke again, her tone both sharp and compassionate. "I believe in forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't mean shirking accountability. If I let you off today, tomorrow, others will be hurt by the same negligence. You must face the consequences of your actions, not only for your own sake, but out of respect for every person on this flight." Her words drew immediate applause, a clear affirmation of the justice she had done. The officers stepped in, firmly clasped Laura's wrists, and snapped the handcuffs shut. The cold click of metal felt like the final verdict on her career. Laura broke down in sobs as she was led away, trembling as she glanced back at the passengers, who watched her with a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction that justice had prevailed. With Laura gone, Naomi returned to her seat, her expression serene and dignified, never joyful or triumphant. To her, this was not a personal victory, but a triumph of respect, fairness, and human dignity. She knew that this moment would resonate not only in the halls of Skylux Aviation, but throughout society, sending a clear message that prejudice and disrespect have no place in the world. As murmurs spread through the cabin, most passengers expressed gratitude for Naomi's firm, principled stance. James Hunter stepped forward with genuine admiration. "Mrs. Williams, I deeply respect your decision. It's a lesson we all need." Naomi smiled softly and replied with firm warmth. "Thank you, Mr. Hunter. The most important thing is recognizing that we are all equal, and no one deserves disrespect because of appearance or preconceived bias." As the cabin door closed behind her, it sounded like a final declaration. Naomi understood that this was not only the end of Laura's story, but the beginning of a larger journey, one she would lead toward a more just, respectful world. After the earth-shaking interview, Naomi's powerful message spread quickly and sparked a widespread call for change across society. But Naomi understood that turning words into reality would require clear, concrete, and constructive action. Just weeks after the incident, Laura was formally brought to trial in the city courthouse. The trial became a media sensation, drawing hundreds to the gallery and millions more watching across news outlets. Laura entered the courtroom looking shell-shocked, her eyes downcast, every trace of her former arrogance gone. Before the judge, she expressed deep remorse for her uncontrolled, discriminatory behavior. The judge, speaking with solemn authority, emphasized, "Ms. Laura Reed, your assault and discriminatory conduct did not just insult one individual, it gravely harmed the airline's reputation and the public's trust. This court must impose a strict sentence to serve as a deterrent for the community." Laura burst into tears when the sentence was handed down. A public conviction, a requirement to pay emotional distress damages to Naomi, a term of community service, and mandated anti-discrimination education. Her ruling immediately dominated headlines and reminded everyone of the serious consequences of failing to respect equality and human dignity. For Naomi, however, this was no time for personal triumph. She saw it as an opportunity to drive deeper, more lasting reform throughout the system she led. At Skylux Aviation's headquarters, Naomi convened a major all-hands meeting with the leadership team to unveil sweeping plans to overhaul customer service standards and anti-racism training. "We cannot allow anything like this to happen again," Naomi declared firmly to her staff and senior managers. "From now on, Skylux Aviation will be a leader in equality, respect, and inclusion. I require every employee, from pilots and flight attendants to executives, to complete anti-bias and cultural diversity training. We will build a workplace where everyone is welcomed and valued, regardless of background, appearance, or social status." Under Naomi's direct guidance, Skylux rolled out comprehensive, in-depth awareness programs. These sessions went beyond theory, incorporating real-world scenarios so employees could fully grasp the serious harm discrimination inflicts on customers. Naomi also tasked each senior manager with regularly auditing service quality to ensure that every team member truly embodied the airline's new core values. One of the clearest successes of these reforms was the case of Grace Adams, the young flight attendant who had bravely spoken up against Laura's misconduct. Naomi publicly recognized Grace's courage and integrity at an internal staff meeting, announcing her promotion to a key management role in training and customer care. "Grace exemplifies the qualities we want to foster," Naomi said with genuine admiration. "Her courage, her integrity, and her willingness to do the right thing under pressure are precisely what we need to build a healthy, respectful, and equal workplace." When Grace stepped to the podium, her voice quivering with emotion, she said, "I simply followed my conscience. I thank Mrs. Williams for giving us the chance to learn and grow. I believe that after this event we will be stronger, more united, and proud to work in an environment that honors everyone." The room rose to a sustained ovation, a clear show of support for Naomi's bold vision. Skylux's culture had transformed overnight into one defined by unity, pride, and heightened responsibility. At the same time, hundreds of letters poured into Skylux's offices, from passengers on that fateful flight and from citizens at large, expressing admiration and backing for Naomi's leadership. These messages weren't mere compliments. They carried hope for a more civilized, fair business environment. News of Skylux's reforms quickly rippled outward. Other major companies began reviewing their own diversity and inclusion policies, emulating Skylux by launching their own anti-bias training and respectful conduct initiatives. Naomi knew the fight was far from over, but the steps she'd taken in the wake of the crisis had laid the foundation for deeper systemic change. To her, this wasn't just a story about one flight attendant's grievous error. It was a call to action for everyone to uphold equality, dignity, and mutual respect. In the rare quiet moments, Naomi reminded herself of one truth. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but with sincerity, determination, and concrete actions, all of us can build a truly fair and respectful future for everyone. The profound changes Naomi initiated at Skylux Aviation soon produced clear, positive results, transforming the company's entire work culture. As time passed, the incident ceased to be a painful scar in the past. Instead, it became a landmark moment, a powerful lesson in ethics and civility that everyone came to respect. 6 months later, on a bright, cloudless morning, Naomi stood at the doorway of her next flight, preparing for a new business trip. She looked up at the sky, and a gentle smile spread across her face as she remembered all she had overcome. She understood that what had happened wasn't merely a struggle to reclaim her personal dignity, but a chance to fulfill her life's true mission, creating positive change in society and altering how people treat each other. Naomi stepped into the first-class cabin of the luxurious jet and was immediately greeted by a team of flight attendants wearing warm smiles and displaying genuine professionalism. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams," the lead flight attendant said with a courteous, heartfelt tone. "It's our honor to serve you today. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to let us know." Naomi returned the smile, pleased to see the sincere shift in the crew's attitude. Gone were the scrutinizing glances and cold indifference. In their place was attentive, thoughtful service offered to every passenger equally. Once she was settled in her seat, Naomi looked around and felt a positive, relaxed atmosphere envelop the cabin. Other passengers were chatting happily and clearly enjoying the attentive, polite service. Naomi gave a small nod of approval, feeling a deep yet gentle sense of pride. She knew her relentless efforts had truly paid off. A moment later, Grace Adams, the lead flight attendant who had grown so much since that fateful day, approached Naomi with a friendly, grateful smile. "Ms. Williams, it's wonderful to see you again. I want to thank you sincerely for giving me the opportunity to grow and learn over these past months. We're all incredibly grateful." Naomi's eyes softened as she looked at Grace. "Thank you, Grace. You're the one who has inspired so many, including me, with your courage and integrity." Grace blushed, but maintained her calm professionalism. "I simply did what I felt was right, Ms. Williams. I'm so glad I could be part of these positive changes." Naomi nodded, proud to see Grace, who had faced such pressure and hardship, now embodying the values Naomi stood for. A gentle chime from the captain reminded everyone to prepare for departure. Naomi leaned back into her plush leather seat and gazed out the window at the promising blue sky. As the jet accelerated down the runway, she thought to herself, "True victory isn't about power. It's about the ability to create positive change in society. That's the greatest success I strive for." The airplane lifted off and soared into the vast expanse, carrying with it the hopes and profound message Naomi had worked so hard to spread. She knew the journey ahead would be long, filled with challenges she would need to overcome, but she felt none of the anxiety or doubt she once would have. Instead, she felt light, brimming with confidence and determination to continue on her chosen path. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude, gentle sunlight streamed through the window, warming Naomi's face. She smiled quietly, aware that this was more than a personal triumph. It was a victory for respect, for compassion, and above all, for the belief in humanity's highest ideals. As the jet climbed higher above the clouds, Naomi closed her eyes, her spirit calm and peaceful. From this moment on, she knew things could only improve, as long as she and others remained steadfast in their mission. A brighter, more equal, more civilized future awaited. And Naomi, with her passionate heart and sense of responsibility, was ready to lead the way. The plane ascended through layer after layer of pure white clouds. Naomi gazed out at the endless blue sky and, with a determined smile, promised herself she would never stop, until the world truly became fairer, kinder, and more worthy of everyone. Naomi Williams' story is not only a lesson in courage and inner strength, but also a powerful reminder of the importance of fairness, respect, and human dignity. What do you think about how Naomi handled that tense situation on the flight? If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful, inspiring content. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.